Welcome to this month's bonus episode of the MMA Lawcast. I'll be breaking down PFL MENA 3, which has some semifinal bouts for the PFL MENA tournament, which will culminate later on this year. Some solid regional talent that they've been able to develop, but for the majority of it, usually we have squash matches in these regional shows, and that's what I'm expecting for a majority of these fights, but there are some sneaky underdogs that I'm hoping that we can cash and take advantage of as well. I do quickly want to plug the MMA Fight Archive if you do your own studying and researching and like finding out who these fighters are before they step inside the cage. The MMA Fight Archive is here to allow you to study up on all these fighters. We cover 17 different promotions from all over the world. We've just surpassed 4,300 fighter profiles for you to study and browse through, and there is a 7-day free trial for you to check it out for free. Just this weekend alone, we have Cage Warriors, 2 of those events, PFL, LFA, OKTAGON 61. Next week to end off September, we got PFL Europe 3, UFC Paris, and obviously Dana White Contender Series. Week 7, check it out, why there's over 90 subscribers. Again, 7-day free trial, link in the description below. Second plug, the MMA LOTN Patreon page. Now, there are 5 total regional events going down this weekend in the absence of a UFC card, and I am breaking down the PFL MENA card for you guys here, which is already broken down on the Lock of the Night Patreon page in written form, but we also have track plays on there posted too. But I will be breaking down the rest of those regional shows on the MMA LOTN Patreon page in written form. That includes Cage Warriors 177 and 178, LFA 193, and OKTAGON 61. Now, I'm sure you guys are wondering, hey, why don't you just drop more breakdown videos this week for Cage Warriors as well? But hey, with the tireless schedule of the UFC, with only 6 weekends off a year, it seems like, or 6 to 8 weekends off a year, I like to take advantage of these off weeks where I don't have to sit in front of the camera on a daily basis, dropping a ton of content for you guys. So I like taking this time on those UFC off weeks to just catch my breath a little bit. You know what I mean? I'm still studying up on these regional shows and only doing it in written form, which is a lot easier than having to set up the studio, look a little pretty for you guys, turn on the camera and turn on the mic, and then record, edit, process, and upload it on YouTube. That's a whole nother headache in itself. So I choose to do these bonus episodes as a gift to you guys. But if you guys want to show your boy a little bit of extra support, the best way to do so is to hop on the MMA LOTN Patreon page, and that's where you'll get all written breakdowns for all the regional events that I cover, numerous throughout the month. But again, in terms of a bonus MMA Lawcast episode, I only do one regional show for you guys a month. I'm sure with all the other great content that I drop on the YouTube page in terms of covering Bellator and the main PFL roster as well, and the Contender Series and all the UFC shows, that's more than a thank you for you guys as well to drop all that free content. So appreciate the love, appreciate the support. I'm not trying to take it for granted at all, but I just want you guys to see it from my lens as well in terms of having to drop, a breakdown for every single regional show. It's a lot. It's a lot of work over here. All right. Without pandering too much here, let's get into it. Let's get into these. I believe it's a 9 or 10 fight card for PFL MENA. I will be referencing my notes a lot here just because, again, it's hard to remember a lot of these guys. They kind of get stuck in the swirl of all these other regional guys as well. So I just like to refer to the notes just to make sure that I'm staying on track here. So let's get right into it. First matchup up is going to be Adam Meskini coming in at minus 200, going up against Yazid Hasanain, coming in at plus 160. Meskini made a great account of himself last time around against Islam Reda in a matchup where I had, I believe, Reda as my lock of the night play that night, and that was way sweatier than I was hoping for it to be, but luckily Reda was still able to escape with the victory. Meskini showed off great grappling defense, had some grappling success of his own later that night, and had some good striking glimpses of success as well. In this matchup against Hasanain is a guy that stepped in on short notice in a main event slot last time around as he took on Abdullah Al-Qahtani, who's actually headlining this card, and he was unable to get off on much of his game. He's a decent striker, decent all-around fighter, but doesn't really seem to have anything special or anything that will take his game to the next level. He got clinched in the first round, then eventually got knocked out in the second round of their matchup. Yeah, there's nothing too special about Hasanain here. I do lean on the Meskini side. I do think he's better overall here, from his defenses to his offense in terms of striking and grappling. I think he'll be able to get the better of Hasanain here. And, I was hoping to get him closer to minus 150, minus 200, parlay worthy in my opinion, but I'll probably end up passing on this matchup. But I'm going to take Meskini, and I think he grinds this fight out. Next up, George Eid coming in at minus 345, going up against Omar Reguigui, coming in at plus 270. Now, Eid is another guy that surprised me in his last matchup, as he's coming off of a 2.5-year-long layoff before stepping in against Abbas Khan a few months ago. I believe that was back in May, and he pulled off the upset. I was very confident in Khan going into that matchup, as I thought that his, training over there at Dagestan with his wrestling and his better overall game was going to be able to overwhelm Eid. But Eid showed great takedown defense, showed great wrestling of his own, but also a much better striking game that hurt Abbas Khan on numerous occasions in that matchup. He's 34 years old, so he's getting up there in age, but he showed that ring rust is not a thing at all for him in his last matchup against a very tough out. He's going up against Omar Reguigui, who's a kickboxer originally, but he has been basically beating cans. He got taken down by a much smaller opponent 2 fights ago, but just due to physicality advantages alone, he was able to get back to his feet and then eventually find the knockout. But we did see him quickly get submitted last time around against Abdullah Salim, I believe the guy's name was. But that was worth Reguigui landing a knockdown and then showing poor fight IQ, following his opponent to the ground and getting submitted. I don't think Reguigui is that good, but you have to respect his kickboxing, and that's what something Eid is going to have to do here. Respect that kickboxing and don't play too long on the feet. I think Eid is the better overall mixed martial artist here. I think if he is smart enough, he'll look to take this to the ground and expose Reguigui there. But I do think Eid wins this matchup. I don't mind him at a bit of a chalky price. I think he wins this matchup without too much issue, as long as he looks to take a grapple-heavy approach and not give Reguigui too much of a chance by strictly striking with him here. So I'll go with Eid, and Eid by decision, maybe even submission, actually. Next up, Elias Boudegzdame. I'm butchering that name, so I'm going to continue to go with Elias. He comes in at plus 240, going up against Ratchet Haz, who comes in at minus 300. Now, this is a matchup between two grapplers, and I was very surprised to see the line as wide as it is. Elias is a very slick grappler in his own right. This guy does a great job in terms of taking the back of his opponents, finding submissions. 16 of his 19 wins coming by submission. He's a 27-fight veteran, has a ton of experience under his belt, and he's only 30 years old. I think he's pretty damn good. So I'm curious as to why he is such a big underdog in the spot. Has a solid grappler in his own right. His 3 losses have come against recognizable names like Jordan Vucenic, Yanis Gamuri, and Franz Malambo. But I think that Elias is at least of that Yanis Gamuri and Franz Malambo elk, or at least that level. So I do think that this will play out a lot more competitive than the line is expecting it to. Both guys have questionable striking, maybe has a little bit of a slightly better striking game, but I expect the majority of this fight to take place in the grappling realm, and from there it's a 50-50 fight in my opinion. So I'm going to go Elias to pull off the upset here. Playing the odds in this matchup. Haz could end up being better than I expect him to. He did pull off an upset last time around against Xavier Alaoui in a fight that I thought Alaoui would be the better overall fighter, but Haz was able to get the job done there. So, again, maybe I'm overlooking something here in Haz, but I do think that Elias can make this a lot more competitive than the odds are saying, and I'm going to take a shot on him here as a plus 240 underdog. All right, next up, Islam Reda coming in at plus 100, going up against Marouane Bellagouit. It's rough trying to pronounce some of these names here, but bear with me, guys. All right, Reda, last time around, I believe he was my lock of the night play, but he did not perform to the level I was expecting him to. Normally, he is a relentless grappler looking to establish dominant position and grind opponents out. Even has a slick submission game as well, but he was unable to really establish that against his last opponent, but still managed to get the decision victory that night to pull off the win. His opponent, Bellagouit, is a very solid striker who has great leg kicks and is showing an improved defensive grappling game. He's undefeated through 5 fights, looks like a very solid prospect. Like I said, grappling defense is slowly improving, which allows him to keep fights in the striking range where he feels most comfortable. He has a great gas tank and packs a lot of power in his punches, and he's taking steady steps up in competition. Now, this is a close fight, just as the odds indicate. Pure striker versus grappler matchup here, but I do have to lean with Bellagouit, not with the most amount of confidence though, because this is going to be the toughest grappler he has faced to date. This is the fight that we'll find out whether Bellagouit has what it takes to fend off a relentless grapple-heavy approach. And normally judges, as we'll be talking about in a few fights here, or at least an example in a few fights here, judges are scoring damage over control. And I think that Bellagouit will have the advantage in terms of dishing out damage in this spot, as long as he doesn't get submitted or completely put on his back and stifled here. I think Reda will struggle to do so. I think Bellagouit will do a good enough job in terms of landing damage, not having too much time eaten off the clock if he does get taken down. But I think we'll see him eventually work back to his feet and get back to his striking advantage and really put it on Reda here. Again, low confidence, but this is a great fight to show us where both of these guys are at. If Bellagouit is ready to continue his ascension in competition and progress through his career, or if Reda, his last matchup was more of an anomaly, even in victory, but it wasn't as dominant of a performance as I expected. We'll see if he can change the tide here and change the narrative and get the win over a solid undefeated prospect. But I'm going to go Bellagouit maybe by TKO or decision. And again, props don't really matter on fights or cards like these, because not often do bookies actually release props for these cards either. So as of right now, as of this recording, there aren't even totals. So just take that into consideration. Next up, Ali Taleb, minus 1,400 going up against Jalal Al-Daaja, coming in at plus 800. Squash match. Taleb, much superior. Minus 1,400 is more than worth it in this spot. Daaja has some solid experience, but I do believe he lost his last fight, but made it to the next round due to the PFL scoring system and the fact that his opponent missed weight. But again, Taleb, squash, kill. I never recommend parlaying anything over, minus 700, minus 800, depending on the level of discrepancy there in terms of skill. So yeah, I'd pass on minus 1,400, but Taleb should win relatively easily here. All right, Suhail Tahiri coming in at plus 255, going up against Mohsen Mohammadseifi coming in at minus 330. Tahiri, very solid striker, but he saw his grappling tested out a lot last time around against Ahmed Amir. That was a matchup where Amir enjoyed a ton of top control time, but was unable to get off any significant damage, which allowed Tahiri to win that fight pretty much off of his back. Obviously, in the striking realm, he landed some big shots, which pulled out a lot of desperation takedowns from Amir, and Tahiri would struggle in terms of getting back to his feet, but still did do damage off of his back and while defending the takedowns before he ended up getting taken down. Very solid striker, very encouraging performance last time around in terms of being so dead set on dishing out damage. But again, you know what his level is, especially coming in as a big underdog here against Mohsen Mohammadseifi, who is a multiple-time world champion in Wushu Sanda. Very solid fighter all around, but has a lot of power in his shots. I tried fading him last time around against an experienced striker in Josh Togo, but Togo, even though he was getting some good shots off, he was unable to deal with the power, explosivity, and physicality of Mohsen, and that ended up with Mohsen landing a big knockout shot in the first round. I'm expecting something similar to pay off here, with Tahiri probably being the better, more technical striker, but the power and just pure raw athleticism of Mohsen is going to cause Tahiri a ton of trouble, and I think that eventually leads to Mohsen landing a big shot and putting Tahiri out here. Chalky, but I think it comes through with how powerful Mohammadseifi is here and him getting the knockout. All right, next up, Mohammed Alaqraa coming in at minus 800, going up against Amir Fazli coming in at plus 550. Now, Alaqraa is probably one of my favorite prospects on the PFL MENA roster. Trains out of Dagestan as well, the Nurmagomedov school, and you can see it in the style. The guy is a very strong grappler, does a great job in terms of establishing his top position, and seems to have the cardio to go 15 minutes if he needs to. He has, I believe, 3 wins by decision on his record, but also had a third round stoppage last time around as he grinded his opponent out and eventually got a position where he could get the ground and pound finish. This kid is very skilled, very physical, very athletic as well. And I hope that he continues to work on his striking game because that will open up the rest of his grappling game as well. His opponent this weekend, Fazli, is actually benefiting from the fact that his opponent pulled out. The original opponent for Alaqraa pulled out. Fazli came up short against Bellagouit Diani, I believe the guy's name was. Fazli was actually a minus 500 favorite going into that matchup, usually relying on a power punching approach, stalking his opponents and landing those big shots. But his opponent, which is mainly known to be a striker, was able to out-grapple him, take him to the ground, grind him out, and pretty much beat him up off of his back. Very impressive performance from his opponent, but unfortunately that opponent pulled out and it steps Fazli to step into the semifinal matchup, but it is a horrible stylistic matchup, especially if Alaqraa can continue to provide that grappling dominance that we've been seeing from him throughout his career. So Alaqraa, minus 800 again. This is usually the limit of where I would parlay a fighter, and it all depends on the stylistic clash and the difference in skill discrepancy. And I think in this matchup, it's probably worth it. Alaqraa, very, very skilled, very, very dominant from that top position. And if Fazli can't get back to his feet, I wouldn't be surprised if Alaqraa actually ends up finishing him here. So give me Alaqraa and Alaqraa by TKO, maybe submission. All right, next up, Jara Hussein Al-Silawi coming in at minus 240, going up against Omar Dafrawy, butchered it. Coming in at plus 190. Silawi, 27 professional fights under his belt, or at least this will be his 27th fight. But it's unfortunate that he's been unable to accrue much success at a higher level. He's a very solid fighter. Power puncher, has a nasty submission game if he needs it. Very powerful, very strong, very intimidating as he walks his opponents down. But he's been unable to find success on the main PFL roster. I think his last loss there was to Solomon Renfro. But he is a solid fighter. I think he will dominate on this level of the regional scene, especially the PFL MENA scene, given the experience that he has and given all the finishing threats that he usually provides. His opponent, Dafrawy, I don't really understand the hype on this kid. I was surprised that the line actually opened up as short as it has. Obviously, a ton of Al-Silawi love coming in over the last 12 hours, maybe even 24 hours, where we saw Al-Silawi closer to minus 150. Now he's up to minus 240. Seems like a lot of people love the Al-Silawi side. But going back to Omar, solid striker. We saw him defeat a 37-year-old last time around. It was a hard-fought fight where we saw all aspects of mixed martial arts from Omar. I think his opponent made a lot of mistakes that he was able to capitalize on. He's riding a 5-fight winning streak, but that's actually on the back end of a 4-fight losing streak that he had between 2021 and 2023. I really like Al-Silawi on the spot. I think he's much better all around. Obviously, Omar has solid striking that he could potentially find a big shot of his own to put Al-Silawi away. But I think we'll see Al-Silawi do a great job in terms of mixing the martial arts, utilizing his grappling here to keep Omar on his back, utilizing power and strength. And I think that will be more than enough for him here to get the win over Omar. So I'm going to go Al-Silawi, maybe even Al-Silawi by finish. All right. Main event time, Abdullah Al-Qahtani coming in at minus 350, going up against Abdul Rahman Alhyasat coming in at plus 275. Starting off the Al-Qahtani side, when I originally researched him a couple fights back when he was on the PFL roster, or at least the main roster fighting in showcase bouts, I was very impressed. Not often do we see Saudi prospects come in with such hype and such promise, but that's what I saw from Al-Qahtani. Very slick striking approach, utilizing slick shots down the pipe, good combinations, good footwork, good leg kicks. We've even seen him recently start using his grappling, which doesn't look too bad either. He did have some weird fight IQ moments against I forgot the Indian kid's name from 2 fights ago, but that was a fight where, he controlled the majority of it, but he did have some slip-ups that his opponent was able to take advantage of, but unfortunately not enough to actually defeat Al-Qahtani. But Al-Qahtani, good fight IQ, good skills, solid striker, looks to be very promising as well. His opponent, Alhyasat, comes in with a 4-0 record, and he looks pretty good. He's strong, has good takedown defense, throws a lot of power punches, crashes the pocket very well, stalks his opponent very well, lands big power. Although he has yet to finish any of his professional fights, it's clear that he does a lot of damage when he lands his shots. So, and that's going to be obviously very important as he takes fights to the scorecards, especially if he goes up against guys that are going to get higher volume than him. If he can land bigger shots, that will ultimately be the difference maker. I'm kind of surprised that the line is as wide as it is. I think maybe it's due to the popularity of Al-Qahtani and people know him more, obviously being on the PFL main roster for a couple of events. But Alhyasat looks like a decent prospect. I think he can stop the takedowns of Al-Qahtani if that's what Qahtani wants to look to do here. And if this ends up being a strictly striking battle, I don't know if Al-Qahtani looks -350. Yes, he is the slicker striker in my opinion, but I think he could struggle with the forward pressure of Alhyasat and some of the big shots that he'll likely be eating here. Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised when doing the research on Alhyasat. Very physical, very athletic, very powerful, very explosive. Again, hits hard, but hasn't translated to finishes here. But I think that obviously helps his favor, landing those big shots, taking command of the cage and the forward movement. And that can end up being the difference maker in this spot as well. So low confidence, but I'm going to go with the upset here. I'm going to go with Alhyasat. Most likely by decision, but I do expect this to play out much closer than the odds suggest. So I'm going to go Abdul Rahman Alhyasat by decision, pulling off the upset. Low confidence. All right. Completely stumbled through pronouncing everybody's name on this card, but we got it done, folks. Appreciate the love, appreciate the support. Remember, there is also Cage Warriors 177 and LFA 193 going down on Friday, along with this PFL card. I'll have written breakdowns for both of those on the MMA, LOT, and Patreon page, link in the description below. And then Saturday, Cage Warriors 178 and OKTAGON 61 going head-to-head. Saturday afternoon, I'll have written breakdowns for those as well. Appreciate the love. Appreciate the support. I'll be back on Monday to break down the Contender Series fights for you guys. And then on Tuesday, I'll be breaking down the UFC Paris card. Enjoy your weekend, folks. Good luck on all your action. And I'll see you guys again on Monday. Peace.
Last thing.